turned on.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is May the 15th, Housing Authority Board meeting, 10:30. Roll call, please.
Mayor Litchfield.
Here.
Commissioner Moya.
Yes. Here.
Commissioner Arias.
Here.
Commissioner Gamera.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Duplantis.
Here.
Are there any considerations of changes or deletions to the agenda?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as is.
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as is.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Duplantis.
Yes.
Commissioner Arias.
Yes.
Commissioner Moya.
Yes.
Mayor Litchfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Gamera.
Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is Resolution 2020-07HA, Housing Authority Transfer of Chaparral Apartments to Eastern Regional Housing Authority. Who's going to present that?
I'll present that, Mayor. I'd just like to go on the record and let everybody know who's in attendance. We have all of our commissioners here present, and joining us through GoToMeeting, we have Jerry Burkholder, Teresa Kester, and Chris Herbert. The previous two were mentioned are from Monarch, and Chris Herbert's from Eastern Regional. At this time, I'd like to ask Angelica to please read the resolution. That way we all know what we're discussing, and then I will hit some key discussion points and then open up for discussion to Teresa, Jerry, and Chris, and go from there.
Okay, this resolution is 2020-07-HA, a resolution of the Tucumcari Housing Authority, City of Tucumcari, Quake County, New Mexico, consenting to the transfer of one multifamily property rural development subsidy, dwelling units, and personal property associated therewith, owned by the City of Tucumcari Housing Authority. Whereas the Tucumcari Housing Authority has determined that it wishes to transfer the one multifamily property, and whereas the Tucumcari Housing Authority believes that the Eastern Regional Housing Authority has the personnel and expertise necessary to properly manage the properties and is willing to accept title to such units with certain contingencies. Now therefore it be resolved, the Tucumcari Housing Authority agrees to transfer ownership of the Chaparral Apartments located at 523 South 8th Street, Tucumcari, New Mexico, 88401, and related buildings, including the personal property utilized in conjunction with or situated within such residences, which real property is owned by the City of Tucumcari Housing Authority. Be it further resolved that the Tucumcari Housing Authority and those employees of the City of Tucumcari may be so authorized and directed to take such steps as are reasonably necessary or required in order to transfer the residential units and all associated property purchased from state or federal funds which was not directly purchased by the City of Tucumcari funds. Passed, approved, and adopted this 15th day of May, 2020.
Thank you. So at this time, I know we had some questions, concerns, and comments the previous Housing Authority meeting that we had held. I've done my due diligence on trying to do some research and try to shed some more light and answer some of those questions and just give a little bit more background information. So I've been in contact with Teresa and Jerry from Monarch Properties, as well as Chris Herbert from Eastern Regional. And I wanted to let the commission know, this Housing Authority Board know that this is a property which is titled and deeded and owned by the City of Tucumcari Housing Authority, not the City of Tucumcari. And when we had voted previously on other resolutions to transfer all assets and properties, I believe this is a key pertinent property that needs to go with it as well. The City of Tucumcari, as a municipality, is not in the business of housing. We do not have the expertise anymore. The staff that was part of the Housing Authority, a different department, and underneath the City of Tucumcari to a point, is no longer with us. Those employees have been transferred to Eastern Regional. There is huge liability and costs associated if the city were to try to take on this property. There is a loan, which is approximately $600,000, which we would have to pay off, which we do not have the funds. Just recently discussing the budget yesterday and knowing the concerns and the pathways we're having to take and laying off people and cut things from the budget to make our budget be where it needs to be. And honestly, it probably needs to be a little bit more strict, but we're doing what we can for what's the best for the city of Tucumcari. I don't feel that we could take on this extra cost. I think it's in better hands of Eastern Regional. They have the expertise and staff to manage such property. And I've been on the conversation, like I said, with these people, and I'd like to let them share some information with you. It's not a huge moneymaker. That's not the intent of this housing. The intent is to provide housing for low income families. So at this time, I would turn it over to Teresa or Jerry so they could kind of give their stance on this and what they think. And then after that, I'd like to have Chris Herbert talk.
Okay, well, I can give a little bit of background that I know at least.
If he could identify himself.
First of all, when
Jerry
these
Berkowitz
conversations started, I reached out to the USDA loan servicer that is in charge of this property. And her name is Delee Taylor. And she just recently started servicing this particular property. It's been with a few other servicers over the past few years. And so she's not that familiar with the original history of how it was transferred and when and so forth like that. I mentioned to her that the housing authority was being dissolved and that the assets of the housing authority were being transferred to the Eastern Regional. And she sent me a copy of the original transfer document, which I think the city also provided a copy to us because we didn't have one. And it does say that it was transferred to the housing authority. So what I reached out to Delee twice to ask her what USDA's position is, because they typically have to approve transfers. And she has not answered that question. I don't know if she doesn't know or if she is just trying to research it and find out an answer. I'm not sure at this point. But I will say that the USDA provided the loan directly to Chaparral. And USDA obviously has a lien on the property for that loan. USDA also provides the subsidy to the residents. So with HUD typically has a regulatory agreement in place with an owner of a property that's HUD insured. USDA doesn't exactly have what they call a regulatory agreement, but I guess the best way to say it is that they do have regulatory authority over the property. The loan that USDA provides is a non-recourse loan. So the city or the housing authority is not, does not guarantee the loan or is, personally, if that's the right term, responsible for it. USDA is pretty much in charge of the property and what happens with it and how it operates and everything like that. And as you know, Monarch manages the property on behalf of the housing authority as well as with USDA. So that's kind of the status of the property. As far as I know, I'm going to reach out to Delee again. I think with the group working remotely, it's a little bit more difficult for her to maybe contact with people, I'm not sure. But I will reach out to her again, but I believe that USDA needs to approve the transfer. That's just my opinion or my understanding of how it normally works. And so I'm a little surprised that she hasn't really said anything about the fact that it's being transferred. But that's about all I can do is let them know that it's happening and that they need to take it from there.
And I agree with you, Jerry. I believe the first step in this process is going to be to pass this resolution. That'd be my recommendation. And then speaking with Chris, I don't want to speak for him, but just conversation. All these key stakeholders would come to the table, being the city of Tucumcari, Monarch, USDA, and Eastern Regional. And then we come together with a plan on how to make this come to action. How are we able to put this plan in and put it into effect? So at this time, if Teresa has anything to say, if not, I'd like to turn it over to Chris.
No, I'm good. Go ahead, Chris.
You there, Chris?
You want a second?
Sorry, yes, I'm here. When Mark and I discussed this resolution, and the wording, we did ask that the phrase "with certain contingencies" be added. And that is because we need USDA, and then not only do we have to get permission, or at least their consent, to effect the transfer, we also have to have some form of long-term restructuring or refinancing on this loan, because that's, there isn't the funds available for this property to pay off that note that is due next year. So I think that's those things are necessary, and so we need to have both USDA's permission and USDA's commitment to some form of refinancing before Eastern could take this property. Those were the contingencies that I wanted to cover this, because we wanted that added, so I wanted to let those contingencies would be. So we would require that USDA consent to the transfer, and that they come to the table and commit to some form of restructuring and refinancing this property, because in our view and in our look at the property, it is a long-term liability if there is no restructuring, and it actually will become short-term liability because the note is due next year. So, and I stand for any questions from the commission.
The other thing, Chris, that we talked about that I just wanted to clear up so there's no concern is there's talk about what would happen to the Monarch contract. And based on our conversation, you feel that there'd be no issue transferring that over to Eastern Region. You guys would pick that contract up.
Yeah, no, we do not. Yeah, absolutely. We do not wish to operate USDA properties. Monarch has expertise in that, and we would continue that relationship. So.
Perfect. Thank you. At this point, I'm to let everybody that's on GoToMeeting, the commission's going to go ahead and ask their questions now.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The question is, why are we doing the transfer? And I know that at this point, there's probably an alternative to this. If we have not even got the clearance from the USDA, and then you're saying is you don't want the property if you can't get the refinancing and everything. So it's almost like nothing is clear in a transaction that we're doing here. And then we're talking about real estate. So an ordinance goes into effect. That means that we are now in the process of processing or getting rid of this property, and that's our idea is to get rid of it. But yet it's kind of like still has a big. We don't have a clear understanding, or like they say in the real estate business, a clear title with this cloud. So what's the deal? Chris?
That's why we have it with contingency, but I'll let Chris answer it.
Well, from our perspective, the situation is that we have contingencies that we require on the property. USDA has to approve the transfer. And again, we need to have some refinancing. We were willing to accept this transfer. In the last meeting, there's some question as to whether you guys want to keep that. As we began to look at it, there's a lot of long-term liabilities covered before we can move forward with the transfer. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does answer. You just said that, but the whole deal is the probability that you will revert it back to the city if you don't get what you want. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, we're not going to accept the transfer if the property is, if the SDA is unwilling to move forward with some form of agreement.
And my question is, why do we go ahead and do a resolution when we didn't even get the approval from the USDA? I mean, this is not very good business-wise doing, we're doing something like on a hearsay, hopefully.
It's the first step in the process to show USDA, Monarch, Eastern that we're all on board, we're all moving towards one common goal. And that's a technicality, it's kind of a check mark in the box going down the list. It's the first step in the process. And now we all come to the table to discuss this and make this transfer come to fruition.
Well, I understand that, but the problem is when you do an ordinance, you are now actually, this ordinance is transferring the real estate. It's a legal order that we already are transferring, it's gonna go, okay? Then.
Well, no, sir, because my board would have to vote to accept the transfer.
But why wasn't all this worked out before presenting to us?
We've been doing this
It's
for
not- Why
months
is the big emergency here? Why can't we do it with a clear title?
because the door is closing where Eastern Regional is to the point where it's such a liability, they're not willing to take it on. So we need to act now before we're stuck with the
So
liability.
we're saying dump it on them.
Not dump it on them. That's why we're gonna work together as a partnership to make this come to life.
Well, they're willing to take their liability. I hope we don't bring it back.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Chris, is there any reason that you see that USDA wouldn't accept you all taking over and refinancing?
No, I wouldn't think so, it seems like it is within their stated mission that they would want to, since rural development is, one of its missions is to provide rural housing for low-income families. So I would assume that there's not an issue in trying to create some type of because ultimately, if this becomes no matter who ends up holding the property, regardless of the situation, if you get into a situation where it becomes unable to maintain itself, if it becomes in such a state that it can no longer maintain its note with the USDA, or when that payment comes due, USDA, much like HUD, they don't want to be operating housing. That's not what the federal agencies do. They want local entities to do that. So I think that they would have a strong motivation to move forward with this as well. But we have to talk to them because we don't have the capacity to say that right now because there's no resolution on a transfer. So until that point, we discuss that with them. That's kind of why this is necessary for us to be able to begin to have the conversation with them. Are these things, is this a possibility? So.
Thank you.
Will there be any liability if you go in and do all this work and then return the property? Would you want some compensation from the city or the USDA or Chaparral or what? Because you're gonna spend some time on it.
Yeah, it is definitely gonna take a good deal of time.
Are you gonna want compensation if it doesn't go through?
Development director.
We should get it in writing, you won't. If you don't have any money.
What is the property worth?
I will make this statement in open meeting. We will not, come back at the city to try to recapture funds that we expend, in an effort to come up with a solution to this resolution. So as we expend time and energy trying to, come up with a solution, we will not hold the city for that at a later date.
Okay, there won't be no liability.
Well, we won't, we won't enforce liability on the city.
Hey, Chris, the mayor had a question.
What is the property worth?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
In looking up in the USDA system, they put the value at $530,000.
That's what we owe on it.
Our loan is.
It's already upside down.
Yeah.
More than that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could, so my worry is if we don't pass this, we don't get the property transferred over, then we default on the loan, or worse, we're forced to come up with it, and that puts us belly up, and then what happens to the residents that are living there? I mean, do we throw them out and they're now homeless? And to me, this is just us safeguarding that people are gonna keep their homes and putting it in the hands of someone who can manage that loan and get it taken care of and ensure that the property stays open for years to come. Unfortunately, I think Commissioner Moy, I agree with you here. I wish the outcome would be better, but these are the cards that we're with.
The whole deal is gonna talk with that level, they wind up with not getting refinancing, that means that people become homeless regardless. But, the whole deal is gonna be based on the refinancing of the property through USDA or whatever he wants to do it with.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, you did say this is the first step in the process just to get that transferred over, to bring all the entities to the table to say, we're willing to transfer it. What process do we need to follow to get it taken care of?
Correct. USDA is looking for something in writing that they know that we're serious. We're wanting to move forward with this process. This property has exchanged hands many times previous to the Tucumcari Housing Authority getting it. There was a few different private groups, I guess, property management groups. So this isn't uncommon to do this transfer, and to go with someone with a reputation with Eastern Regional, I feel it's going to be that much more easier to make this process happen.
Yeah, and I'll say this, Teresa, I'll give you some kudos here, and Chris, I think I am comfortable with doing this with your, I won't say promise, but your commitment to ensure that Monarch stays as the operating managers, just because, Monarch's done a great job. They've gotten the playground reestablished. They've gotten the majority, if not all by now, of the units renovated. I think Teresa's done a good job at doing this, and, as long as they continue doing a good job, that they remain the managers of that, just that way there's no disruption to the residents.
Well, I think, Chris, I appreciate those thoughts. I think that would be Jerry and Jack's decision, but I would say that we would maintain management. Would you agree with that, Jerry?
Yes, we would continue to manage it, and I believe that that's no problem with USDA. So I don't see any problem with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I really feel this moves in the best interest of the residents in the city of Tucumcari. All entities on this conversation right now, I think this is the best case scenario for everyone, honestly.
All right, any more discussion, questions?
There's nothing else to discuss. It's just-
No, anything else? Okay. Thank you, Jerry, Chris, Teresa. So I guess next would be to entertain a motion
Thank you.
to accept resolution 2020-07 Housing Authority transfer of Chaparral Apartments to Eastern Regional Housing Authority.
I'll make the motion that we do this resolution 2020-07 Housing Authority, transferring the Chaparrals to the Eastern
Housing Regional Authority.
Authority. I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Duplantis,
Yes.
Commissioner Moya,
No, and I'm saying no because I feel that many times things are brought at a crisis level rather than at a business level that should have taken place a long time ago. This is not the way to do business or manage anything. Mismanagement is not a way to use as a crisis. No.
Thank you.
Mayor
You're
Litchfield,
welcome.
Yes. Thank you.
Commissioner Gamera,
I'll go with yes.
Commissioner Arias.
Yes.
Okay, next the, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, roll call.
Vamos.
Who's second?
I'll
Ralph
second it.
did. Oh,
Mayor Litchfield,
yes.
Commissioner Arias,
Yes.
Commissioner Moya,
Yeah.
Commissioner Gamera,
See.
Mayor Pro Tem Duplantis.
Yes.
Jerry, Teresa, and Chris, I appreciate it. I look forward to working with you and reaching out offline and doing what we have to come to the table and make this come through.
Okay, recorders are still on, guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Talk to y'all soon.